Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today we begin a new book, the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy. In the first 4 books of the Torah, Moses wrote down everything God told him. But now he will begin to recount the story of the Israelites from his own perspective. And he starts by naming the various locations. We read Paran and Tofel, Lavan, Chatzerot, and Dizahav near Suf. The Yam Suf was where they had the crossing, the Sea of Reeds. Each one represented a significant guidepost for the people. Then Moses said, it's an 11-day journey from Horeb, which is Sinai, to Kadesh Barnea by Mount Seir route. We may pass over this really quickly, but the imagery in this one statement is rich with the experiences that the Israelites had. It should have taken them just 11 days to reach their destination. So what happened? At Sinai or Horeb, 3 to 6 million people had had a unique encounter with the creator of the universe. This should have left them drunk with joy and amazement. But his next words, to Kadesh Barnea, pointed to where they had made a terrible choice. It was from there that Moses sent out 12 scouts to bring a report back to him about the land that God was giving them. 10 of the 12 came back and discouraged the people so badly that they rebelled against Moses and God. These same people who had had that amazing experience with their God would now be forced to wander 40 years in the desert until that entire generation had died out, except for 2 men, Joshua, who was a native-born Israelite, and Caleb, who was a ger, a stranger, who lived with us. And those 2 men cried out, "Do not be afraid. God is with us. Immanuel, God is with us." You know, many of us have had a spiritual moment which we cannot put into words. It was an epiphany, a moment when a spiritual lightning bolt pierced our hearts and the eyes of our souls were open. Did that happen to the people standing there at the base of Mount Sinai? It appears from their behavior that if they had, it was all but forgotten. But isn't that what happens to us every time our faith or our emunah is challenged? Don't we forget the God who promised to be with us every step of the way? It's a process to learn how to trust Him. And in that process, we find ourselves time and again drowning in a glass of water. So what should we do in those moments when we falter? Well, we can remind ourselves that because we know that God is with us, our life becomes like an upward spiral. We take 2 steps forward, but only 1 step back. That's important to remember, and that gives us hope. The process of teshuvah begins with our acknowledgement of what we have done wrong. Now remember, the scouts' refusal to go in and take the land was like saying to God, "We don't trust you." But then they admitted their guilt. They completed step 1. Good. But what about the next step? We'd go from acknowledgement to seeing how we can make things right. But instead of consulting God to see how to make restitution, they ran head on into battle. And they even refused to listen when Moses warned them not to go and fight the enemy on their own, that God wouldn't be with them. Then, when they were defeated, they cried out to God, but now He wouldn't listen. How often in the history of our people has this happened to us? We refuse to heed God's warnings, and then we cry out, "Where was God?" instead of asking, "Where are we?" Then Moses jumps ahead 40 years later to the first day of the 11th month as they're at the border of the promised land preparing to enter. He tells the people that their God, Yud-He-Vav-He, the only one, would keep his promise to their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and assign to them all the land from the desert to the hill country of Lebanon, from the sea to the great river. I don't know how many of you have noticed how many people around the world, including Jews, even Orthodox Jews, have been chanting, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. But look at what we just read. They refuse to see that God gave this land to the Israelites. And their demonstrations display their hatred of authority, the authority of God. They display their love of chaos and destruction of property. But the God of Israel creates order out of chaos. So Moses, in order to do so, he reminds the people that God had multiplied them until they were as numerous as the stars of the sky. Then he takes practical steps. He begins by choosing wise and experienced men to govern over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, just as some of us do. Then Moses told the leaders of each tribe, "Hear out your fellow Israelites and decide justly between one party and the other, whether it's our fellow Israelite or the Ger. Do not be partial in judgment. Hear, listen to the high and the low alike. Don't fear either party, for justice belongs to God." The Torah teaches us vital principles, and this is a very important one for us to live by. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice, you must pursue. You know, the most difficult thing for any of us to do is to tell the truth. If we read what Isaiah said, if we listened when we read the Haftorah portion, I don't know how difficult it was for Isaiah to tell the truth. And most of us are afraid that people will mock us. They'll call us naysayers or negative people, or even worse. We rarely even tell ourselves the truth. Our prophets were killed for speaking truth. But Moses was desperate for the second generation, the children of those who had died in the desert, to learn from the mistakes of their parents. And he cried out, "You have no faith in your God, Yud-He-Vav-He, who goes before you on your journeys to scout the place where you are to encamp. He was with us in fire by day and cloud by night." No, the opposite way. By fire by night and cloud by day, to guide you on the route you are to follow. Not one of those involved, this evil generation, we don't like to think that of those people or ourselves, but he called us an evil generation. And he says, none of those involved shall see the good land that I swore to give to your fathers. No one except Caleb, son of Jephunneh. He shall see it. He named Caleb first, notice. Then he'll talk about Joshua. So none except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, shall see it, and to him as his descendants will I give the land on which he set foot. Why? Because he remained loyal to God. And Joshua, son of Nun, who attends you, shall enter it. Imbue him with strength, for he shall allot it to Israel. You and I have the choice in whose footsteps we will follow. Will we follow the 10 spies who caused rebellion and death, like those today who are crying out death to the Jews, and Palestine shall be free? Or the two men, Joshua and Caleb, who chose to be loyal and they chose life? From this, we can also learn not to side with the majority, but with those who choose to believe or to listen to the truth of God instead of believing in the lies of men. You know, Moses told his people in the second chapter, Deuteronomy 2, indeed, your God, Yud-He-Vav-He, has blessed you in all your undertakings. He has watched over your wanderings through this great wilderness. Your God has been with you these past 40 years. You have lacked nothing. Isn't that an amazing thing to know that throughout our lives, God blesses us and provides everything that we need? So why is it so hard to trust him? Well, it's like going back from Sinai, where we had that great encounter, to Kadesh Barnea. It's a process. First, he introduces himself to us like he did at Sinai. Then we enter the process at Kadesh Barnea, a wilderness of fear and testing, where with every small step of faith that we dare to take, we choose to take, our trust in him grows. You know, Moses wrote this book for all future generations, including ours, painstakingly during that 40 years in the desert. And he told us, do not add and do not take away anything from this Torah, from these words, because there will be serious consequences. It says in Exodus 24:4, Moses wrote down all God's words. And they do not include the added rules and regulations written down later by religious sects, religious people, and which supplant his written Torah. His written Torah is a universal book containing God's morals, and they teach justice for all. You know, during the next 2 months, we will delve into the rest of this book, Devarim, until the upcoming holidays. Yom Teruah, which is today known as Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and we end with Shemini Atzeret. Note that the Torah does not include the added day of Simchat Torah. Even though we celebrate it, it's not in the Torah. Why do I mention this? Well, these are God's Moedim, his appointed times. And remember, we just heard the Haftorah portion in Isaiah 1, which gave us God's perspective on what we have done. He said, my soul loathes your new moons, not his, and your appointed times, your Moedim, not his, not the ones he gave us. These are all the added ones, the added rules and regulations. He says, they are a burden to me. I am weary of them. And when you lift your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. And when you pray at great length, I will not listen because your hands are full of blood. This is hard to hear. And the next line tells us what God wants from us. This is true religion. He says, learn to do good, even when you don't want to. Seek justice, even when you see none. Relieve the oppressed. Judge for the orphan and stand up for the widow. Look around the world today. Do we see justice? Who can we believe? Who can we trust? And who is to blame, God or us? We keep coming up with band-aid solutions instead of dealing with the root problem. You know, when I was in school, one of my favorite subjects was algebra. Every time I learned a new equation, I would write it in the back of my notebook and memorize it and study it, remembering each equation and learning which elements to place into it. And then all I had to do when we had tests, I just simply applied the various elements to each equation that I had learned. It was fun. This is how today I see what we need to do with the Torah. God gave us his algebraic equations, his 10 commandments. And all we need to do when we come up with all these problems, we apply them to our lives, to these equations. I know it sounds simplistic, but keeping the 10 Commandments is not easy. They're a full-time job, and they force us to make responsible choices. And of course, we're going to fail. But that's when we have been given the process of doing teshuvah, how we make things right. God gave us the ability to think, to use his gift of free will to make good choices for our lives and those around us. And the Torah is the key to unlocking the truth that will bring peace and justice to the world. You know, I know that many people are waiting for a savior, for the Messiah, for the second coming, whatever it is you call it, to come and fix things. But I think it needs to begin with us. We've become so accustomed to needing a superhuman type, a Superman type hero to save the day, and we forget what the Torah tells us. Remember when Abraham negotiated with God about saving the wicked cities? These were not even good cities, the wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. He negotiated with God and he said, God, if there are 50, will you save it? And God said yes. And then he went down to 40, 30, and he ended with, if there are 10 righteous men, will you save Sodom and Gomorrah? God said yes. If there are 10 righteous men, I will save it. And don't we say that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow? So what if you and I were to simply work on being righteous? Would that not save our cities? Isn't that a formula that Abraham shows us? And how do we do that? Well, let's go back to what Isaiah just said. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Don't take bribes. Put him first. Relieve the oppressed. Stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. Help the orphan, the fatherless, the stranger among us, those who cannot fight for themselves. Stand up for the widow. You know, Moses was addressing the children of the people who had witnessed the miracle of the 10 plagues. They had walked out of Egypt with their animals and all the gifts that had been bestowed upon them from the Egyptians. They had left the land which had held them captive for so long, and they had stood at Mount Sinai listening to the voice of God who had set them free. Now, this second generation was now at the culmination of their journey, and Moses was desperate to help them continue without him. He reminded them that they were not to fear or be dismayed, because God, the God who had freed them, would always be with them. He told them, none other than your God, the only one, Yud He Vav He, who goes before you, will fight for you, just as he did for you in Egypt before your very eyes and in the wilderness, where you saw how your God, Yud He Vav He, carried you as a father carries his son all the way that you traveled until you came to this place. This knowledge was not just for them, it's for us. And we need to remember these words when we become discouraged and afraid. Shabbat Shalom.